Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on a really profound journey, I think. One that's going to take us deep into a concept woven right into the fabric of human history, religion, and maybe surprisingly, even our modern world.
Yeah, blood sacrifice.
Exactly, blood sacrifice. And this isn't just about, ancient altars and dusty rituals. Not at all. Our mission today is to try and understand a profound logic and maybe a haunting legacy that continues to shape things in ways you might not expect.
Indeed. We're going to unpack how deeply ingrained this whole idea is, from those, well, those ancient bloodstained altars you mentioned, all the way to, believe it or not, superhero movies.
Really, even there.
Oh, absolutely. And political movements, too. Our goal for this deep dive is basically to take a stack of really fascinating sources, everything from classical anthropology, modern psychoanalysis, critical theory, and pull out the most important bits of knowledge and insight for you.
Like a shortcut.
Exactly. A shortcut to being genuinely well-informed on a topic that is, I think, far more complex and pervasive than it first appears. It's almost like a hidden grammar of how humans act.
Okay, I like that. A hidden grammar. So we'll be digging into groundbreaking theories from thinkers like James George Frazer, Rene Girard, David Bakan, Georges Bataille.
Some heavy hitters.
Definitely. And we'll connect their ideas to religious traditions like early Christianity, seeing how it sort of both embraced and maybe even subverted this logic. And then the key is bridging that understanding to modern stuff, right? Modern culture, politics.
Revealing how these sacrificial patterns actually persist in our supposedly secular world.
Right. So the mission isn't just what sacrifice is, but why? Why has it stuck around for millennia? What human needs does it maybe try to fulfill? And what could its enduring meaning be for, well, for all of us, for our future? Let's really unpack
Let's
this.
do it.
So when we talk about the ancient roots, the real beginnings of sacrifice, one of the foundational figures we just have to start with is James George Frazer and his massive work, The Golden Bough.
Monumental, really. Sprawling. It took decades to publish all the volumes.
Yeah, and it was this towering achievement in comparative anthropology back then. Frazer looked at sacrifice not as, just isolated primitive cruelty or simple superstition.
Which is how many people probably still think of it.
Right. Instead, he saw it as this fundamental ritual mechanism woven into the very fabric of ancient civilization. He called it an act of cosmic participation.
That sounds significant.
It really was. That's where he started to, well, blow people's minds. Fraser's core idea was that early societies, including the ones practicing human sacrifice, weren't just doing it to appease angry gods like we often assume.
Okay. So what then?
Instead, they believed they were literally sustaining the cycles of life itself. Imagine living in a world where you genuinely feared the sun might not rise, or the rains might not fall, or the crops wouldn't grow unless you did something.
Wow. That's a heavy burden.
Immense. So sacrifice, for them, was this offering of blood, maybe human blood, maybe animal, to ensure rain, a good harvest, fertility, victory in war, the health of the tribe. It was what he called a sacred economy of death for life.
A sacred economy.
Yeah, a profound exchange where something precious, something vital had to be given up to guarantee existence continued. A terrifying, but for them, vital bargain with the cosmos.
And nowhere is this idea clearer or maybe more disturbing than in Frazer's famous account of the dying king.
Ah, yes, the dying king. Infamous is the right word.
He details these figures who were, in his view, ritually murdered, not out of anger, but to preserve the tribe's vitality, its life force. It sounds utterly barbaric to us now.
Of course. But for them, it was maybe a calculated attempt, a desperate one, to control nature through symbolic death. Frazer even kicks off the Golden Bough with that haunting mystery of the priest-king at Nemi, the king of the wood.
Right, tell us about that again. Well, this was a figure whose position, his very life, depended entirely on him killing his predecessor in single combat. And then he reigned, armed, constantly waiting, constantly anticipating being slain himself by the next challenger.
That's chilling. Power given only to be ritually taken back.
It's a brutal cycle. But Frazer saw it not as just random savagery, but as law as brutality, sanctified by belief. The idea was the king's vitality, his life force, was mystically linked to the land, the crops, the people.
So if the king got old or sick?
The whole community could suffer. Crops might fail, cattle might get sick, the tribe itself could decline. So in their logic, killing the king, or the god king, wasn't just wanton cruelty. Frazer argued it was seen as a solemn religious duty performed for the good of the whole community.
Wow, so kingship itself is sacrifice, in a way.
Exactly. It reveals this profound, almost chilling logic. Divine rule has to be consecrated through eventual death. The king is both the protector and the eventual victim. His elevation seals his fate. His blood was seen as fertilizer for the future.
And Frazer traced this pattern everywhere, didn't he? Across countless cultures, Egypt, the Celts. And it was always tied to seasons, agriculture.
Almost always, yes. It wasn't just about the king dying. It was about his blood not just being shed, but fertilizing the earth. The slain king literally becomes the seed, buried, from which new life is expected to bloom. It's a kind of mythic agriculture, human action influencing the cosmos.
So figures like Osiris, Attis, Adonis, these gods who die and come back.
They fit this pattern perfectly. Gods who die, often violently, and are then resurrected, symbolically tied to the crop cycle. Frazer saw sacrifice as humanity's attempt to, well, sow death in order to reap life, paying a grim price for cosmic renewal.
He had that quote, didn't he, about the death of a god?
Yes, a powerful one. The notion that the death of a god is necessary to the renewal of the world is one of the oldest and most persistent beliefs in human history. That's a staggering claim, right? It suggests this deep, almost instinctual human link between blood, death, and new beginnings.
What strikes me reading Frazer is just how close sacrifice and sovereignty are. The king is adored only to be destroyed. His sacredness actually demands his destruction.
Because he becomes the most powerful offering. It's a chilling truth. The more sacred the victim, the more potent the sacrifice.
Now, people critique Frazer's methods today, right? Say he made connections that were too simplistic.
Oh, definitely. Modern anthropology is much more rigorous, more localized, but his sheer breadth of vision, recognizing sacrifice as the central logic in human culture, that remains incredibly powerful. It's the insight that really kicked off so many other theories we'll discuss.
He really identified something fundamental, didn't he? Something deeply unsettling.
Absolutely. And even if we recoil from the explicit rituals he described, that echo, that pattern of the sacred victim, it persists, doesn't it, in subtler forms?
Like how?
Well, think about leaders who are ritually torn down in politics, sacrificed on the altar of public opinion, or soldiers asked to shed blood for the nation, even celebrities maybe. Their public downfall sometimes feels ritualistic.
Huh. I hadn't thought of it quite like that.
Frazer opens the door to seeing sacrifice not as just random violence, but as a structured, almost necessary thing in certain worldviews. In the ancient world, blood wasn't just spilled, it was offered. And the one who bled wasn't always the enemy. Sometimes, tragically, it was the beloved king.
That inversion, destroying the sacred for the collective good.
It's a logic that keeps reappearing. In Christianity, political martyrdom, our justice systems, war. It's an idea that once you see it, seems almost impossible to fully shake from the human psyche.
Okay, that is a powerful and, yeah, pretty grim thought. So if Frazer showed us this ancient cyclical dance, this cosmic participation, then René Girard offers a much darker take, right?
Much darker, yes.
Yeah.
But equally profound. For Girard, sacrifice wasn't primarily about agriculture or mythic cycles. He saw it as a violent social technology, a way for human communities to handle their own internal chaos.
Yeah.
By ganging up and killing someone.
That shifts the focus dramatically, from the cosmos to the crowd.
That's the crucial difference. Girard, in his famous book Violence and the Sacred, argued that sacrifice doesn't come from gods or nature, but from human desire itself. His big idea is mimetic theory.
Mimetic, meaning imitation.
Exactly. People don't desire things independently, he argued. We imitate each other's desires. You see someone wanting the latest gadget, suddenly you want it too. Not because you need it, but because they want it.
Okay, I can see that with stuff. But he means more fundamental desires too.
Oh yeah. Status, recognition, power, even romantic partners. As these mimetic rivalries heat up everyone wanting what the other wants, communities get destabilized. Violence spreads, it becomes contagious, chaotic, threatening to tear the group apart from the inside.
So how does sacrifice fix that, in Girard's view?
By redirecting all that escalating, free-floating violence onto one single victim. The scapegoat.
The scapegoat. We still use that term.
We do, and Girard gave it this deep theoretical grounding. The scapegoat is usually someone marginal, someone different, a foreigner, maybe someone with a disability, someone too powerful or too weak. They aren't chosen rationally. It's more like a spontaneous, unconscious social agreement.
Then once chosen.
They're demonized, blamed for the community's problems, and then destroyed in a ritual act that, paradoxically, brings this immediate sense of unity and peace back to the group. Girard said, violence is generated inside the community, but it is projected outward onto the surrogate victim.
So the killing feels justified. to the crowd.
Entirely justified, even holy, because it works. It restores order. Chaos is magically transformed back into cosmos, disorder into divine order through this shared act of killing. The relief for the mob is immense. They feel purified.
And Girard claims this is the origin of sacrificial religion.
That's his bombshell. He argues that myths, rather than revealing the injustice of the scapegoat killing, actually hide it. They sanitize the violence. They make the victim look guilty, make the killing seem necessary, maybe even divinely commanded.
So, what looks sacred is actually
Sanitized murder. That's Girard's provocative claim. The gods don't demand sacrifice. The community demands a death because of its own internal violence, and then blames it on the gods. Religion is born, he says, as a lie told by the crowd to justify its own violence.
wow. That's a heavy accusation against religion.
It is. It completely flips Frazer's logic. For Frazer, sacrifice was about fertility, cosmic cycles. For Girard, it's a political, anthropological tool to manage human violence. The sacred isn't what justifies violence. The sacred is violence, just misrecognized and made holy.
The primary function of sacrificial ritual, Girard says, is to keep violence outside the community by redirecting it upon a victim.
Exactly. It's a powerful, almost cynical view of how societies maintain order by constantly finding an other to blame and destroy.
But Girard makes a really unique argument about Christianity, doesn't he? That's key to his work.
Absolutely crucial. This is what makes him so influential, especially in theology. He believes that Christianity, specifically the crucifixion of Jesus, uniquely exposes this whole scapegoat mechanism.
How so?
Unlike ancient myths that hide the victim's innocence, the Gospels shout it from the rooftops. Jesus, in Girard's reading, is the first scapegoat whose innocence isn't just known, but profoundly emphasized by the story itself. He doesn't fit the guilty victim mold.
So the cross isn't just another sacrifice?
For Girard, it's the opposite. It's the revelation and the undoing of sacrifice. Christianity, he argues, is the only religion that unveils the scapegoat mechanism and sides with the victim. It's an extraordinary claim about this subversive power hidden in the Christian story, a challenge to humanity's age-old addiction to scapegoating.
Yet even Girard admits that Christianity itself hasn't fully escaped this logic, right?
Right. He points out that even Christianity, while revealing the mechanism, still ends up sacralizing blood through things like atonement theology and the Eucharist. It gets complicated. The gravitational pull of sacrificial logic is incredibly strong.
Which leaves us with a really challenging question for today, doesn't it? Do our modern institutions, justice systems, political campaigns, how we justify wars, still follow this pattern? Are we still, like the ancients, maybe blind to the blood on our own altars, the hidden victims of our collective desires?
It's a question that forces us to look deeper, doesn't it? To spot the subtle ways we might still be scapegoating. Girard pushes us to ask if modern societies still rely on these hidden sacrificial mechanisms for peace and order, maybe without even knowing it.
It's like holding up a mirror.
A chilling mirror, exactly. Underneath the legal language or the patriotic speeches, is there still a victim chosen by a crowd desperate for peace? And does that crowd still convince itself the victim deserved it or that their suffering was somehow necessary? It's profoundly unsettling.
Definitely unsettling. This idea of a crowd needing a victim, externalizing violence. It makes you wonder about the internal side. What does sacrifice do for the individual's mind, their psyche?
And that's where David Bakan comes in. With his psychoanalytic view, he opens up this whole new, deeply psychological angle. If Frazer gave us the ritual and Girard the social function, Bakan is really looking inside the human heart.
Okay, tell me about Bakan, psychoanalysis and sacrifice.
Yes, Bakan, in this really powerful essay, The Fundamental Need for Human Sacrifice, argues these rituals fulfill an enduring psychic and symbolic need. For him, sacrifice isn't just culture or religion, it's a deep psychological mechanism, a way we cope with the big anxieties: death, guilt, authority, our own moral contradictions.
So the victim becomes, what? A symbol.
A vessel, essentially.
Yeah.
A vessel for externalizing those internal tensions. Whether the victim is literal or symbolic, sacrificing them provides a kind of temporary psychic relief for the individual or the community.
So it's about our inner struggles, our guilt.
That's central to Bakan's idea. He thinks human sacrifice arises from this basic tension between our need for order, for obedience rules we get from parents, society, God, and the fact that we inevitably transgress, we disobey.
Like Freudian ideas of prohibition and guilt.
Very much so. From childhood, we internalize don'ts from authority figures. When we break those rules, even in thought, it generates guilt. And the psyche, Bakan argues, can't always bear that internal conflict, that weight of guilt. It needs an outlet, like an internal pressure cooker needing to release steam.
And sacrifice is that release valve.
Precisely. By projecting that unbearable guilt outward onto an animal, a child, a scapegoated criminal, the individual finds temporary, often unconscious relief. Bakan wrote, "The sacrificial victim is the unconscious substitute for the self, onto whom guilt and aggression can be projected and ritually destroyed."
A substitute for the self.
Wow. So you sacrifice the victim instead of facing your own inner conflict directly.
In a way, yes. Imagine the shame of breaking a major taboo or the fear of punishment. The victim acts as a symbolic container for all that turmoil. Ritually destroying the victim feels like purifying the self or the community by proxy.
He talks about child sacrifice too, which is deeply disturbing. Why would the child, the firstborn especially, be the ideal victim in some cultures? Bakan connects it to these complex Freudian dynamics. The child represents innocence, pure potential, but also, unconsciously, rivalry. Primal urges, challenges to parental authority. Now, just killing your child would be the ultimate transgression, generating unbearable guilt.
But sacrificing the child
Changes everything. It reframes the killing as obedience to a higher power, to God. It transmutes an unforgivable act into profound piety. Guilt becomes devotion.
The story of Abraham and Isaac.
The classic example. Abraham obeys God, nearly killing his son. What would be a horrific crime becomes the ultimate act of faith. Bakan insists this isn't just theology, it's psychology dressed up as religion. The binding of Isaac is really the binding of Abraham's internal conflict between love for his son and obedience to God within a sacred story.
It provides a framework, a way to process that unbearable tension.
Exactly. So Bakan argues modern societies haven't outgrown this need. We've just repressed it, made it abstract.
How so? Where do we see it?
War, capital punishment, systemic injustice. These become the new forms of sacrifice, performed not in temples, but in courtrooms, prisons, battlefields. The modern state acts like the ancient priesthood, sanctifying certain kinds of killing as necessary, just even redemptive. We still look for outlets for collective guilt and aggression, even if we don't call them sacrifices.
He has that chilling line.
Where blood once stained the altar, it now stains the flag or the gavel. The psychological function is the same. Purge guilt, channel aggression, contain chaos.
So Bakan complements Girard then. Girard is about the community managing violence, Bakan about the individual managing guilt.
Yes, they complement each other beautifully. Girard focuses on the social crisis, Bakan on the inner torment, but they both agree. The victim is usually innocent, and the sacred somehow is built on blood.
And Bakan really pushes it inward, doesn't he? Sacrifice isn't just something societies do to others.
It's something people do to themselves by proxy. The execution, the martyrdom, the offering. They're all mirrors reflecting humanity's unresolved contradictions. It makes the persistence of sacrifice less mysterious. It binds society, yes, but it also binds the self. It's a terrifying, but maybe effective way to cope with being human.
Even abstract theology, like atonement or original sin, can be seen through this psychological lens.
Bakan would say yes. They gain new clarity as psychological solutions to moral anxiety. From this perspective, Christianity making Christ the once-for-all sacrifice isn't just theological innovation, it's profound psychological closure.
Wow.
The crucifixion becomes the ultimate externalization of all guilt, all sin, all punishment onto one perfectly innocent victim, ritually slaughtered so others might live. The deep emotional power of that story isn't accidental. It satisfies that deep psychic craving for purification by blood that seems embedded in us. For millions, it offered immense relief from the burden of guilt.
Okay, from those psychological depths, let's shift gears again to George's Bataille. He sounds different, radical, almost mystical.
Radically different, yes. For Bataille, sacrifice is not a transaction. It's not a payment, not even really a purification in the ways Bakan or Girard meant. It is an eruption, a deliberate rupture of meaning, economy, rationality. It's almost an anti-explanation.
An anti-explanation, what does that mean?
Well, unlike Frazer seeing it as necessary for crops, or Girard and Bakan seeing it as a mechanism for order, Bataille flips it entirely. For him, sacrifice is the moment when order collapses, when reason dissolves. The sacred emerges precisely in the act of destruction without return.
Sacrifice destroys that which it consecrates. That's his quote, right?
Exactly. The victim isn't a tool to get something. The victim is a portal to an experience beyond utility, beyond meaning itself.
He makes this big distinction between the profane and the sacred.
Crucial distinction. The profane is the everyday world. Use, production, stability, meaning. Things we can measure, exchange, use for a purpose. Work, tools, rational thought.
And
The sacred is the opposite. It's excess, waste, transgression, ecstasy. To enter the sacred, for Bataille, means leaving the rational world behind, entering a space where destruction and ecstasy just merge. Sacrifice is the doorway, not because you offer something to get something back, but because it annihilates meaning and utility.
So it's about unproductive expenditure, la dépense.
Yes, la dépense, that's central. In a world obsessed with utility, with making everything productive, sacrifice reclaims the useless. It wastes, it burns, it gives without any return for no logical reason. Where we often find our sacred in accumulating things, capital, virtue, salvation points, Bataille says the true sacred is in loss, pure expenditure.
Like ancient sacrifices.
Exactly, that's why they were so potent. They destroyed something valuable for no instrumental reason. A fattened bull, the prize animal, just slaughtered and burned. A royal child, the heir, given to the flames, precious wine poured onto the dirt.
What's the point then for Bataille?
The point is the pointlessness, in a way. Each act declares, not everything is for use. Not all value is economic. It pushes beyond reason into pure ecstatic loss. A confrontation with the void, maybe?
He even connects this to eroticism, right? Seeing it as sacrificial.
He does. Eroticism, like sacrifice, disrupts order, disrupts identity. In deep erotic union, the individual self dissolves, merges with the other. It's a loss of self in ecstatic merging.
A brush with death.
A brush with death, a limit experience, escaping the prison of selfhood and reason momentarily. Bataille actually wrote, eroticism is the sacrificial act of the self. All sacrifice is erotic, all eroticism is sacrificial. Both transgress boundaries, self and other, life and death, pushing to the limit of being human.
How does he read the crucifixion, then, compared to Girard?
Very differently. Girard sees the cross revealing the scapegoat mechanism, maybe undoing sacrifice. Bataille sees it as the ultimate sacred rupture, the self-emptying of God into suffering and waste. Christ isn't just a substitute, he's the perfect figure of expenditure, voluntarily embracing pain, humiliation, death without any rational purpose or material return.
His blood isn't currency.
It's pure gift, in the Bataillean sense, poured out, excessive, unreciprocated. Like Paul says in Philippians, he emptied himself, even unto death. For Bataille, Christ enters the abyss of sacred excess, a pure, unproductive loss that just shatters rational meaning.
So sacrifice, for Bataille, isn't moral or rational. It's mystical, maybe even obscene.
For some, yes. It's not about managing guilt or society. It's a violent doorway into the real, the terrifying truth of existence. Maybe the revelation of death is the ground of being. Where others explain sacrifice, Bataille wants to experience it, to feel the limits of existence dissolve in that ritualistic frenzy.
It's almost spiritual, but a spirituality of chaos.
Exactly. And he argues this sacred hasn't vanished in our modern rational world. It's just hidden. It simmers beneath spectacles of violence, media frenzies, sexual obsessions, but it's still there.
Oh.
Every time something precious is destroyed for no reason, an act of radical protest, selfless love, pure madness, the sacred pulses beneath. The altar is hidden, maybe, but it still drips with blood.
It really makes you wonder, why does sacrifice still move us so deeply, even in fiction or these extreme acts?
Maybe, as Bataille suggests, it speaks to that unresolved recognition that redemption requires profound loss, that this self has to be given away to be found, not for utility but for itself, a confrontation with the absolute.
That's incredibly thought-provoking, and it leads us right into thinking about how Christianity, specifically, navigated this world already full of sacrificial ideas. It wasn't born in a vacuum, was it?
Not at all. The early Christian world emerged in this buzzing spiritual marketplace, full of mystery cults, apocalyptic hopes, and yes, widespread sacrificial practices. It was competing for followers, for spiritual real estate.
And one of the biggest competitors, or maybe parallels, was Mithraism.
Chief among them, yes, the Roman cult of Mithras. Its central image, the Tauroctony, the bull-slaying scene, cast this huge symbolic shadow over the Mediterranean religious world.
And there were parallels with Christianity.
Striking parallels. Even though Christianity eventually won out, both faiths used blood sacrifice, symbolically or ritually, as a core part of redemption and initiation. As Mithraism faded, many of its symbols and structures were kind of absorbed or reconfigured by Christianity. The blood under Mithras' knife, in a way, finds its echo in the blood from Christ's side. Symbolic siblings, you could say.
Okay, so tell us more about this Tauroctony, the Mithraic bull slaying. What was it about?
It's this incredibly vivid image. Mithras, usually in Persian clothes, is kneeling on a bull, plunging a dagger into its neck. But it's not just killing. From the bull's wound, life pours out wheat from its tail, Wine from its blood, animals, even humanity itself emerges from its body.
So death creates life.
Exactly. It's creation through sacrifice. The bull dies, the world is born or renewed. The sacrifice isn't punishment. It's generative. Life from death, cosmos from blood. Initiates into Mithraism went through secret rites, often in underground temples called Mithraea, trying to align themselves with this cosmic drama. And blood, real or symbolic, was essential for that rebirth.
And Christianity obviously also puts blood right at the center.
Absolutely central. The crucifixion is described in vivid sacrificial terms all through the New Testament. It becomes the single axis of salvation. Jesus at the Last Supper says, "This is my blood of the covenant poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins."
Connecting it to Jewish Passover, but also these broader traditions.
Right. And like the Mithraic bull, Jesus is slain not just as punishment, but for transformation. His blood brings new life, forgiveness, a new covenant.
So did Christianity borrow directly from Mithraism, or did they both just tap into the same cultural ideas?
That's the big debate among scholars. It's hard to prove direct borrowing. But what's clear is how the Eucharist, Holy Communion, functions as this kind of sublimated mirror of the Tauroctony.
How so?
Instead of a literal bull, Christians symbolically consume Christ's body and blood through bread and wine. It's internalized. But it's no less potent for being symbolic. Maybe even more potent because its abstraction lets it endure, penetrate deeper. As one source put it, where Mithraic sacrifice was visual and mythic, Christian sacrifice became verbal and liturgical.
It shifts from outer ritual to inner meaning.
Exactly. Mirroring that Christian move from external law to internal spirit, it makes the sacrifice repeatable, accessible anywhere.
So the sacrificial logic isn't negated, it's actually deepened. The altar is still there, symbolically, even if the literal knife is gone.
Precisely. Christ is both priest and victim, that inversion we saw with Frazer's king and Girard's scapegoat. And like the Mithraic bull, Christ's death isn't just mourned, it's reenacted ritually, again and again. Each Eucharist recalls that moment of blood and redemption, offering believers a tangible share in that sacred wound and its promise of new life.
So the competition between them was really about whose sacrifice was more effective.
Fundamentally, yes. Both offered transcendence through death, salvation through blood. Why did Christianity prevail? Theology was part of it, sure, but a huge factor was its ability to universalize the drama.
How do you mean?
Mithraism was pretty exclusive hierarchical, mostly for men, tied to Roman soldiers. Christianity threw the doors open. Male, female, slave, free, Jew, Gentile, everyone was invited to partake in this sacrifice.
And that inclusivity helped it spread.
Massively. Its universal victim, Jesus, could absorb all sin, all guilt from anyone. Its liturgy could be done anywhere, no temple needed, no animal slaughtered. And its theology offered not just mystery, but deep meaning. Suffering is redemptive, blood isn't spilled in vain, the wound of Christ heals the world. That was a powerfully attractive and adaptable spiritual package.
So the blood of Mithras, the blood of Christ, symbolic siblings.
Born from that shared human impulse to find meaning in loss, both saying, death brings life. Ritualized violence makes transcendence possible. Whether on stone altars or wooden cross, the logic flows. Blood is revelation, blood is rebirth, blood is the ultimate currency of salvation.
That really sets the stage for understanding maybe the most foundational and sometimes perplexing Christian doctrine, original sin, and how that doctrine seems to require sacrifice.
Absolutely. At the heart of traditional Christian theology is this. This haunting paradox. A good world made by a good God is somehow stained by an inherited guilt. A guilt so deep, so pervasive that only the blood of God himself can cleanse it. That's original sin.
And that creates a theological necessity for sacrifice.
It does. The assumption becomes that sacrifice isn't just helpful, it's metaphysically required for humans to be reconciled with God. The link between sin and blood, guilt and atonement, isn't just incidental, it's structural. The blueprint of salvation. As one source says, sacrifice is the ritual response to a cosmic wound that humanity cannot repair. Original sin becomes the engine driving the sacrificial machine. It sets up a problem only a divine offering can solve.
And it was Augustine who really solidified this doctrine.
Augustine of Hippo, early 5th century, yeah. He crystallized it. He argued the fall of Adam and Eve wasn't just a moral mistake. It introduced ontological corruption into human nature itself.
Ontological corruption, what does that mean?
It means sin isn't just something we do, it's something we are. We inherit this flaw. It's passed down generationally, tainting even newborns, so humanity can't save itself. We're condemned by default, born estranged from God because of this inherited spiritual defect.
Okay. But God is just, so sin has to be punished.
Right. God's righteousness demands it. But God is also merciful. So he offers a substitute, his own son, crucified, to take that punishment. The result is this profound theological mechanism tying guilt, blood, and justice together.
The Epistle to the Hebrews is key here.
Pivotal. It flat out declares, without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. That verse underpins the whole necessity of blood sacrifice, making Christ's death the single indispensable act of redemption. It's like a cosmic legal transaction.
So Christ's sacrifice isn't just love, it's also presented as the legal satisfaction of God's wrath. Penal substitution.
That's the doctrine in a nutshell, yes. The sinless one takes the punishment for the guilty. The cross isn't an accident. It's the divinely ordained fulfillment of the sacrificial logic that started way back in Eden. As that source put it, the entire narrative arc from Genesis to Golgotha is stitched together by blood. Abel's blood, the blood of bulls in the temple, all pointing forward to the blood of the Lamb.
This really transforms ancient sacrifice, doesn't it? It's not cyclical anymore.
No, it becomes this once-for-all act, a cosmic legal deal that fulfills and supposedly makes obsolete all previous blood rituals. But paradoxically, it also embeds sacrifice even more deeply into Christian identity.
How?
Through rituals, through the Eucharist, baptism into Christ's death, every sermon on the cross. They all reanimate this sacrificial imperative. The body isn't burned, it's broken symbolically. Blood doesn't flow from animals, it flows symbolically from chalices, eternally present. The altar remains transformed into a table, but still centralizing sacrifice.
But doesn't this risk, enshrining violence as somehow saving?
That's the critical question many scholars raise. If the world is shaped by original sin, then pain gets meaning, punishment gets purpose, suffering can even be wholly necessary. The cross in this view doesn't reject sacrifice. It elevates it, moralizes it, sanctifies it as the ultimate expression of divine justice and love.
Which could reify the very violence it claims to overcome.
That's the danger. The idea that the innocent must die for the guilty becomes not just acceptable, but sacred, a divine requirement for peace. The crucifixion isn't seen as tragedy, but triumph.
And that has real ethical consequences.
Profound ones. Throughout history, sadly, this logic of redemptive suffering has been used to justify war, martyrdom, corporal punishment, even colonial conquest or persecuting minorities. If blood can save, then shedding it under the right circumstances can be framed as love, or at least a necessary evil for a greater good. It blurs the line between justice and vengeance, mercy and domination. A dangerous legacy.
But it's not just brutality, right? There's that subversive element, too.
Crucially, yes. The victim isn't a bull or a goat, it's God incarnate. This inversion echoes Girard Christianity unmasking sacrifice by placing God on the altar, siding with the victim, not the one demanding blood. The cross reveals what religion often hides. The victim is innocent, the crowd, humanity, its power systems, is guilty. So Christianity both enacts and critiques the sacrificial order. It holds that tension.
Still, the logic of original sin, atonement, it keeps that sacrificial wound open.
In a way, yes. It maintains something is fundamentally broken in us, something we can't fix. And blood, Christ's blood, is the only cure. The ritual changed, the act is once for all, but the structure remains. Sin demands blood, guilt demands substitution, salvation is written in red.
And this logic, this structure, it doesn't just stay within religion, does it? It seems to seep out into the secular world, too.
Absolutely. While the ancient altars aren't smoking with bulls and kings anymore, the modern world, as our sources argue, hasn't ditched sacrifice. It's just changed the stage, changed the costumes. It's deeply embedded in political power and war, punishment, national myths.
So the logic persists. Some must bleed so others can live free or secure or redeemed.
Exactly. The insights from Frazer, Girard, Bakan, Christian atonement theory, they find their secular heirs in the modern state and how nations operate.
Right.
The state becomes a kind of secular high priest, deciding who gets sacrificed.
War seems like the most obvious example.
The most visible, the most visceral. The language around military service is soaked in sacredness. The ultimate sacrifice. Blood for freedom, dying for one's country. Soldiers are praised not just for skill, but for their willingness to be ritual victims. Their bodies offered on the altar of national sovereignty. We call them heroes, but the underlying story is often one of redemptive loss.
Their deaths become gifts, purchasing collective life.
That's the narrative. Memorialized not just as losses, but as gifts that ensure the nation's life and freedom. The tomb of the unknown soldier is like a modern Holy of Holies. Anonymity itself is consecrated. Absence becomes a powerful, almost religious presence. It echoes Frazer's dying king, but on a national scale.
And political thinkers picked up on this, like Carl Schmitt.
Schmidt, yeah. Writing in the shadow of world wars, seeing totalitarianism rise. He argues sovereignty is the power to declare the exception, to suspend law to preserve order. And this often involves sanctioned violence, detention, execution, war, which function as secularized sacrifices.
Very Girardian, the scapegoat chosen for the good of all.
Precisely. The state, like the ancient priest, decides who lives and dies to maintain order. Their destruction is justified as necessary to prevent greater chaos.
And this extends into the justice system, too. Capital punishment.
It does. In many places, capital punishment still feels like a ritualized expiation, society purging collective guilt or fear. The condemned prisoner becomes a symbolic surrogate, bearing the community's sins, purged through death. The courtroom functions like a modern liturgy, reciting guilt, invoking authority, pronouncing death. Even when framed as justice, the structure mirrors ancient sacrifice.
Like Bakan said, the violence of the executioner is the unconscious extension of the violence of the god.
Exactly. That psychological need for a victim to carry our burdens persists, just cloaked in legal procedure.
Nationalism, too, right? Founding myths.
Deeply sacrificial. Stories of founding fathers, revolutionary heroes suffering, spilling blood to consecrate the nation. These aren't just history, they're rituals, repeated in pledges, holidays, anthems, memorials. The founding is cast as a primordial sacrifice, its blood binding the people in shared devotion. Nations become secular religions, martyrs, rites, sacred texts.
So empire itself is a sacrificial machine.
Fundamentally, yes. It demands loyalty, extracts life, justifies its violence with grand narratives of salvation, manifest destiny, civilizing missions, wars for peace. Empire frames its victims as necessary offerings. Their suffering only matters if it serves the dominant myth of progress or order.
And Christian theology, sadly, sometimes reinforce this.
Especially in its imperial norms. Tragically, yes. The cross, once a critique of power, became a symbol endorsing crusades, conquest, colonization. If Christ's blood saves souls, then the blood of infidels or savages could be spilled without guilt, justified by a higher purpose. William Cavanaugh argues the modern state basically absorbed religion's sacrificial apparatus, even while claiming secularity. The myths of sacrifice did not die, he says, they migrated.
They found new homes in secular ideologies.
So modernity isn't the end of sacrifice, it's transformation, it's adaptation. The sacred victim is now the soldier, the criminal, the refugee. The altar is the battlefield, the prison, the border. The priest is the politician, the general, the judge. But the core logic, it's still there, often unspoken. Peace requires blood. Order requires pain. Someone must always be chosen to bear the burden for the rest of us.
Okay, so despite this idea of a disenchanted modern world where science rules, sacrifice hasn't vanished, it's migrated into the cultural bloodstream, movies, protests, celebrity culture.
Absolutely. It hasn't gone away at all. In a time that claims to be past blood altars and divine wrath, we're surrounded by these powerful reenactments of the sacrificial drama. It's still the currency of legitimacy, power, truth.
Movies seem like a huge place for this. Superheroes, sci-fi.
Oh, they thrive on sacrificial structure. Think about it. Tony Stark in Avengers. Endgame, snapping himself out of existence to save everyone. Neo in The Matrix, dying, seemingly, to free humanity. Katniss Everdeen in The Hunger Games, offering herself up. They are lionized precisely for their willingness to die so others might live.
There is a clear pattern, isn't there? Chaos, threat, a chosen one, suffering or death, order restored.
Unmistakable arc. It echoes everything we've talked about. The hero's blood, or their willingness to shed it, redeems a broken world. Even if they survive, their suffering is the price of salvation. It's mythic sacrifice, rebooted, cleaner, digital, maybe, but just as ritualistic. The Tauroctony becomes CGI. The Eucharist becomes a blockbuster. Bataille's sacred, unproductive expenditure is right there on screen.
And Bataille would say the sacred is still sort of trembling beneath that spectacle.
Exactly, a powerful unconscious pull. But it's not just passive consumption. Look at protest movements. They often resacralize the body through public suffering.
How do you mean?
Think of the civil rights marchers, taking beatings on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, hunger-striking prisoners, Tibetan monks setting themselves on fire. These aren't just political acts. They feel like ritualized offerings, sacrifices made to awaken conscience.
So the wounded protester becomes a kind of scapegoat that indicts the system.
Precisely. But unlike Girard's original scapegoat, whose guilt is hidden, this scapegoat reveals the system's guilt through their suffering. It makes injustice visible, its prophetic performance. The body, like the Lamb or Christ, becomes this site of profound meaning. Suffering becomes the currency of revelation.
And unlike state sacrifice trying to preserve order, this often seeks to disrupt it.
Right, to expose the violence and the status quo. Contemporary art plays with this too. Marina Abramovich's Rhythm Zero.
Oh yeah, that was intense.
She lay passive for hours, with objects rose, knife, gun, letting the audience do whatever they wanted. The gallery became a sacrificial space. Her body, altar, and offering. The audience, like an ancient mob, struggled with its own desires, violence, shame. She was cut, stripped, almost shot. It mirrored Bakan psychology, Girard's crowd dynamics, revealing the violence lurking beneath civilization.
And even celebrity culture. You see it there too.
Absolutely. The obsession with rise and fall stories, Britney Spears' breakdown, Kanye West's spirals, the idolization of murdered artists like Tupac or Kurt Cobain. It reflects this collective need for public martyrs.
Consumed, crucified, resurrected in media myth.
Exactly. Their suffering sells, feeds collective identification. They become pop saints, ritual victims for a secular age, public immolation for collective consumption.
So underneath it all, why does sacrifice still move us so much?
Maybe it's that unresolved thing in us, that recognition that redemption seems to require loss, that truth demands risk, that the self somehow has to be given away to be found. Sacrifice isn't dead. It's just shifted robes, priest to pop star, bull to superhero, temple to stage. We're still haunted by blood, fascinated by the wound, captivated by the promise that suffering might somehow still save us.
That's a powerful summary. And it brings us right back to that pertinent, maybe perplexing paradox of sacrifice in Christianity itself. The crucifixion. It's both the peak of ancient sacrifice and its reversal.
That's the crux of it. On one hand, Christ is the perfect offering, innocent, chosen, bloodied, willingly slain for the sins of the world, fulfilling prophecy.
But on the other hand, the Gospels seem to scream that the whole system, religious and imperial, got it profoundly wrong.
Exactly. Jesus isn't just any victim. He's the victim who exposes the lie under the altar, the violence of the scapegoat mechanism. Christianity is this double-edged revelation. As Girard argued, Christ's death reveals the scapegoat's innocence and the violence in sacrificial logic. Unlike myths where gods demand victims, the Christian story says, this man was unjustly murdered by people trying to keep peace and order. Girard called it a reversal without precedent.
So the cross disrupts everything. It affirms sacrifice by putting God on the altar, but undermines its necessity by showing the injustice.
It's a theological earthquake. If sacrifice masked human violence as divine will, Christ's death unmasks it. God doesn't demand blood, we do. It reveals a world so addicted to sacrificial thinking it would kill God rather than give up the structure. The resurrection, then, isn't just defeating death, it's rebuking sacrifice itself. God returns in peace, not vengeance, offering a way beyond the cycle.
And yet, the institutional church often went back to sacrificial terms, penal substitution.
Here's the tension, the rub. Especially after Constantine, the church increasingly reinterpreted the cross in explicitly sacrificial terms. Penal substitution, Jesus punished in our place to satisfy divine justice, effectively reinscribes the logic the Gospels might have challenged. It says the innocent must suffer, the Father must be appeased, blood remains the only path. What started as critique got domesticated into doctrine, bringing back old patterns.
And the Eucharist embodies this tension, remembrance versus reenacted sacrifice.
Perfectly. Is it a communal meal of gratitude, or an echo of the sacrificial meal, with priest, altar, invocation of blood? The church as new temple, the cross as new altar. The old grammar remains remarkably intact, just spiritualized, eternalized through ritual. Do this in remembrance of me can subtly become, do this to continue the sacrifice.
It's ambiguous. Is Christ's death the last sacrifice ending the cycle, or the first true one perfecting the old system?
Maybe both. That's the ambiguity that haunts Christian history. It preserves the intuition that guilt needs resolution, justice needs satisfying. But it puts the burden on the innocent God, not the guilty. It lifts up the victim. That's its beauty, but also its peril.
Because in practice,
while theoretically subverting the scapegoat, Christianity has tragically reenacted it. Heretics, witches, Jews, colonized peoples, cast as Christ's enemies, sacrificed for doctrinal purity or moral order. The altar that lifted the lamb sometimes justified fresh blood, echoing the very violence it claimed to overcome.
Yet there's still that counter-narrative in the Gospels.
The whisper, yes. Blessed are the merciful, love your enemies, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Words of a God who offers himself, identifies with the victim, not the executioner, who teaches redemption comes through voluntary love, forgiveness, not vengeance or forced suffering. A subtle but radical shift.
So sacrifice is both filled and undone. Altar becomes table, priest becomes victim. blade sheathed, but the wound remains memory, warning, invitation. The cross is both mirror and threshold.
Reflecting our violence, but hopefully opening a path beyond it.
Okay. So if sacrifice is this ancient grammar of religion, empire, identity, imagining a world beyond it feels radical, but is it possible? Must blood forever be the price of meaning? Must justice always come soaked in sorrow?
The thinkers we've looked at, Frazer, Girard, Bakan, Bataille, show how deeply woven sacrifice is into us, how powerful it's been. But maybe now, in our current age of crisis and connection, we have to try and learn a new grammar, a post-sacrificial ethic.
And imagining that isn't about being naive,
Right.
ignoring history.
Not at all. Sacrifice arose for reasons catharsis, structure, solidarity, hope. But as Girard warned, when its mechanics are hidden, when we're blind to the scapegoat, it becomes a trap. It invites us to do it again, sanctify violence, justify power. Christianity, at its best, reveals the victim's innocence, subverting the trap, but too often it reinstated it. A truly post-sacrificial ethic takes that revelation seriously and refuses to go back to the altar.
So what would that look like? What are the core ideas?
It starts with deep empathy for the victim, seeing them not as necessary, but as unjustly chosen. Their suffering is a failure of our humanity. It means rejecting the logic that says someone must suffer for others to be safe or pure. In any context, war, justice, economics, theology, this ethic sees violence not as sacred or redemptive, but as failure, a breaking of relationship. It echoes that challenge. I desire mercy, not sacrifice.
The implications are huge. Politics.
Resisting policies that make the marginalized pay for national comfort. Spotting hidden scapegoats in rhetoric.
Religion.
Reclaiming rituals that nourish without demanding death or punishment.
Ethics.
Refusing to base morality on shame, fear, or substitutionary guilt.
Daily life.
Seeing conflict as a chance for reconciliation, healing, restoration, without creating new victims.
Can we still meet that psychological need Bakan talked about for processing guilt, grief?
Yes, but not violently. Art, confession, communal mourning, nonviolent protest highlighting injustice, shared silence, bamam. These can be new liturgies. Ways to work through conflict without demanding a victim.
And Bataille's rupture. That need for excess, the sacred.
Find it not through death, but through radical generosity, vulnerability, joy that refuses utility, ecstasy without destruction.
Even the Eucharist could be reimagined.
As a reversal of sacrifice. A meal where everyone is welcomed, fed, no one bleeds. Not appeasement, but communion. Radical hospitality, overflowing grace. A table, not an altar.
We don't live in that world yet. The pull of the knife, the scapegoat, it's strong.
Ancient patterns, deeply ingrained. But maybe, just maybe, we're starting to remember such a world as possible. Every time we choose mercy over vengeance, truth over scapegoating, restoration over punishment, we resist that gravitational pull. We let the victims speak. We remember blood should never be the price of love.
Maybe the most revolutionary claim of the Christian story wasn't that God required sacrifice,
But that God became the sacrifice.
Yeah.
Not to sanctify the system, not to reinforce the need for blood, but to end it. The cross, then, maybe isn't about divine wrath.
but about human violence endured and transformed by divine forgiveness. A love that refuses to demand another victim.
In that light, a post-sacrificial ethic isn't rejecting the sacred. It's true fulfillment, the sacred finally unbound from blood.
Wow, okay, that was quite a journey. Through millennia of human thought, practice around blood sacrifice, from ancient kings and gods all the way to modern media, global politics, it has profoundly shaped how we think, organize, justify things.
It really has. Understanding these mechanisms, it gives you new eyes, doesn't it? You start seeing patterns you might not have noticed before.
Definitely provides a deeper lens. It's a lot to process, challenges a lot of assumptions about how the world works, how societies function, even how our own minds work.
It absolutely does.
So as you, our listeners, step away from this deep dive today, maybe just consider this. What stands out most to you from all this? How might this understanding of sacrifice, its pervasive logic, maybe reshape how you see the news, cultural stories, maybe even your own internal conflicts, feelings of guilt?
And maybe, just maybe, the path to a truly compassionate, truly just future lies not in finding new things to sacrifice or new scapegoats to blame, but in learning how to truly value every single life without ever again demanding a single drop of blood.
Until next time, keep diving deep.